Welcome to Put Simply, the podcast that puts what's happening in the world simply without compromising on the details. Erdem Koch is my name, Rodney McCune, and Ozan Ibrisim my co-hosts. Gents, good to be back.
Good to be with you.
You feel like strangers. We've had such a gap, but we'll try and warm things up fairly
It has
quickly.
been a while.
I've missed you guys.
Well, good thing nothing has happened in the last 2 weeks, so we don't actually have a whole lot to get through today. Of course, the sarcasm hopefully is evident in my voice, and the one we are starting with is the development over the last couple of days, a sensational U-turn by the US President Donald Trump, who effectively called on Congress to pass a bill which would see the release of the Jeffrey Epstein files. And that has happened. Both chambers, of Congress agreed to order the US Justice Department to release the files on the convicted sex offender. The Justice Department now has 30 days to release that once President Trump signs it into official law. Rodney, an almost unanimous vote in the House of Representatives, one abstaining, or one voting against, I should say, and then the Senate unanimously fast-tracking it without a formal vote. How did we get here when there was so much resistance from Trump to not release these files?
This bit's easy. He after last weekend, trying to and the last number of weeks trying to press people not to vote for this, he realized what way the wind was blowing, and he decided he wanted the wind in his back rather than in his face, and he about turned and has now gone on the offensive pretense that he had supported this all along, which is pretty remarkable. Any other political figure would be beyond embarrassed and shamed to do this, but Trump just keeps trucking, and you never quite know where things are going to end up with this particular administration. So yeah, it's the U-turn of all U-turns. He's done it because he had to do it, and he's now pretending that he was on the right side all along.
I have to say, I was very confused when he did that massive U-turn. And in the back of my mind, I thought he must have done some sort of deal to ensure that his name is taken out of the Epstein files, or, we're not going to have access to the real Epstein files, etc. And of course, what happened this morning, there has been a Bloomberg report talking about the fact that that the files, and apparently it was leaked, that the files are all redacted, and apparently all of this is an administration and someone who's committed to transparency, but apparently all references to Donald Trump are being removed. So it will be very interesting to follow that report.
They'll just be filled in over time. Apparently there's over 2,000 references to Trump in emails alone. So
I think what they're doing is removing references to Trump and putting in Bill Clinton instead.
Mr. President.
Kind of like a, Control F, find Trump, replace with Clinton type approach.
Exactly.
I mean, we laugh because, how else do you get through this crazy world? But what are the implications for Trump, Rodney? If let's assume that they're not redacted and there's a whole heap of references to Trump, we know that there has been some relationship over the years between Trump and Epstein, whether or not that lasted till Epstein's sort of final days before he was in jail, or, at what point did Trump kick him out of his resort in Mar-a-Lago, etc. Like the dates are questionable or fudgy or whatever you want to call it. But the reality is there was a relationship between these two people. Is it going to mean anything more than what it means today, depending on what's in the files?
So what there won't be is clear evidence of criminal behavior, but what there is the potential for is strong evidence that suggests he knew what was going on all along. Evidence to suggest that he continued a friendship post-conviction, potentially into his first term as president. And there's an issue around a Thanksgiving dinner that they both attended long after Trump said that he was no longer in contact with Epstein. So there's obviously you're obviously you're going to laugh, but there's an honesty issue here in terms of how transparent he's been about it. And I know what you're thinking. He lies about everything. Why is this any different? It just is different. And there's an issue of trust. There's an issue of confidence within his base, and that's why it's different. But there's also a perception that must be there after the past few days, that if people in the Republican Party or the MAGA right stand up to him, he folds. We had the taco thing in terms of tariffs. It feels like a domestic version of the taco thing. And the issue will be, when next will the MAGA base decide to stand up to Trump? And if so, they will do so with the expectation that he can fold again. So I think for a number of reasons, and particularly his relationship with his base, this is significant. But it's not going to have him, locked up in jail, because we're going to find incontrovertible evidence that he's done something deeply criminal. I just don't think that's where this will end up. But again, you never know. The world is full of surprises.
But it doesn't have to end up there. I think I can't imagine that there's anything in those files that is going to change the course of where his coalition and his whole kind of relationship with not only his own base but the American people are going. I honestly think that the damage has been done. The fact that he made this such a big issue, despite the fact that people in his own base, his own confidants, everyone has been calling for the release. He, didn't make it happen. In fact, he ensured that the Speaker of the House didn't call the House into session just to avoid a vote on this. Just that type of damage is irreversible. And we've said this a lot, I think, in the past, saying that, this is the one that's going to kind of break his coalition and what have you, etc. But I reckon on this one, I might put a bet on. I'm not much of a gambling man these days, but on this one, I might put a bet on and say that what's happened in the last 3-4 weeks. I was going to say the cracks in his base, but they're more than cracks. Now they're full on potholes and what have you. They are, I mean, they are in meltdown. I think MAGA is not going to be the same MAGA that we saw in the past. People like Marjorie Taylor Greene, others, Tucker Carlson, these people are these people are the real kind of America First MAGA people, and whilst they may not have the support that President Trump has, they can certainly carry a lot of significant support within that coalition. And if they start to suddenly break away from there, that has seismic kind of impact in terms of the what that means from an electoral point of view.
Speaking of his base and the politics of this, how does it fit in what's happened in the last couple of weeks, which is, of course, some of the local elections that have taken place, most notably the win by Zohran Mamdani as now the mayor-elect of New York, and other Democratic wins across the nation as well. Now, these were Democrat strongholds, but we've seen an incredible turnout, an incredible swing. Do we read anything into this, into how this will play in politically, particularly as we approach the midterms and whatnot? Or is this so localized and it's not really an anti-Trump vote or protest, I guess? Where do you sit on that, Rodney, and how do we make sense of it all?
Yeah, look, I think the interesting thing is, and there are different voter blocks within those places that the elections took place, so we need to be careful of not reading too much into some of the patterns. Obviously, Mandani in New York led a very affordability related campaign. It was different than some of the other elections, and they spanned different elements of the party, and therefore from the Democrats' perspective, it may well be it was horses for courses in terms of voter areas and so on. But I think the interesting point for me is the strength of the vote against and in effect against Trump as one of the key drivers in voter motivation. So therefore, they weren't so bothered about where the Democratic candidates sat on the spectrum. providing they weren't grossly offensive. And in fact, one who was considered to be pretty reasonably offensive still got elected. So what you have is, I'm not going out to vote Democrat, I'm going out to vote against Trump. And that's why this is particularly dangerous for the Republicans, because the candidates who surfed the positive Trump wave previously are now facing a bit of a Trump tsunami, and they've still got to go and paddle out to sea, and that's quite difficult from the Republican perspective. If this persists and continues, next year's elections are going to be something quite spectacular. But of course, things can change between now and then. If you were the Democrats and you were wishing to pick a pretty good position to be in, not least given where they were, weeks and a couple of months ago, I think they're in a pretty good position now.
I mean, look, there is no doubt that the Democrats have got a significant momentum right now. I think they were able to achieve their objectives through the shutdown, and of course the results from the recent elections, the off-year elections. But I don't, Rodney, I agree with you 100%. Let's not confuse this as Democrat success. Much of this is complete of Trump and his agenda and what he's been doing in the last 10 months. And the only things that you need to look at, which will give you the evidence of that, is in New Jersey and Virginia, where the Democrats that were running were able to get, I think, 7 or 8% of those people who voted for Trump in 2024. The figures aren't final, but this is what the exit polls are showing, which basically means that people are disappointed. This is not what they signed up for, and it all comes down to one thing: cost of living. Trump has fallen into the same trap that Biden fell into. Telling people that what they're experiencing every time they go to the supermarket or the gas station, etc., is actually not true. He's trying to convince people that his tariffs are amazing, and that that there is no longer a cost of living crisis, and people see through that, and unless you're in the cult of MAGA, and you voted for Trump because you were so sick to death of the cost of living crisis, and you wanted Trump, as he said he was going to do something. You believed in him, and you said, you voted based on that belief. You're going to see that the last 10 months have not only just not made any difference to your cost of living pressures, but we now find ourselves in, going back to his first term of just utter chaos, and people have had enough of that. I think just in 10 months, last term that he had, it took them 3 years to figure out, okay, this is not for me. But now it's taken them 10 months, and I think if this sort of trend continues, and the Democrats start to, the Democrats don't need to reform their party, and their brand at this point in time, because that's going to be a longer term thing. But if they continue to put up candidates who focus on the real issues that matter to people, I think they're going to have a very, very, very strong kind of showing when it comes to the midterms next year.
And of course, Zohran Mamdani, the incoming mayor of New York, did run on that, right? He ran on freezing house rents in the city, addressing cost of living issues, etc. Now, whether or not he sees through those policies and what happens, of course, time will tell. But from a political campaigning perspective, that was definitely the thing that he banked on largely, and then, of course, carried into his victory speech, and no doubt will form the first sort of few days of his administration or his oversight of the city. But you juxtapose that with what then happens in the White House. And we saw this overnight. At the time of recording, Trump has wrapped up an interesting meeting with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, effectively the de facto leader, if you will, Mohammed bin Salman, also known as MBS, and $1 trillion promised by Saudi Arabia as an investment to the US. Rodney, talk us through the impact of this sudden strengthening of the Saudi and US relationship and what that means moving forward.
Yeah, I don't think it's sudden. I think it's consistent, and Trump's always been pro-Saudi, even during his first term. And the significance, of course, is it's the first time since Khashoggi that MBS has been back in the White House. Ideally, from Trump's perspective, it would have been to announce the Saudis joining the Abraham Accords. The chances of that were zero, not least given Israel's recent um, military action in Gaza. So that was never going to happen. Where there was opportunity was around strategic partnership, defense, arms sales, uh, big numbers of investment. Whether they ever translate into reality is irrelevant, but it's a headline for Trump. And Trump to sort of, uh, you know, be the big guy in the room, another world leader. He's never going to be rude to MBS in the same way that he was tactically rude to others, such as Zelensky. And yeah, it's just another one of these meetings, another series of big number announcements that make no difference to people's ability to pay for their shopping. So therefore, from the the perspective of the American public, it doesn't really mean anything or cut through. But yeah, arms sales, defense partnership, another visit, job done, no change for people on the ground, and more disquiet within MAGA. That this constant focus on foreign relations isn't really what America First was also all supposed to be about.
I'm just wondering whether he gave MBS a tour of the work in progress of the new Grand Ballroom. That's my kind of take on all of this. Um, but look, yeah, everything Rodney said, it's a very uninteresting thing, if you ask me. Not of great significance. Yes, there was talk of the F-35s. Apparently, they've come to a deal, etc. But where politics is today, and where the MAGA movement is today, where the US is today, I'm surprised that they even went ahead with this visit because, if you're going to pick one day where you're going to visit the US president, you don't want it to be the day where both houses of Parliament or Congress actually approve the release of the Jeffrey Epstein files. So I think a lot of it's going to get lost. I don't think anything will cut through, really. I think it's probably an opportunity lost for MBS. And for Trump, I don't think it's going to really help him change the narrative on anything.
Yeah, it's not sufficient for Trump to deflect, but from MBS's perspective, it's just a bit of a letdown that he's going for his big visit at a time of a difficult domestic environment.
I'm really surprised they went ahead with the visit, to be honest with you.
Trump did receive a question from a reporter about a potential conflict of interest that he may have in not just hosting MBS, but of course then the agreements that have been reached with Saudi from a financial perspective. It's no secret that the Trump family business does work closely with Saudi Arabia. Just this week, the Trump organization and a Saudi-based development partner announced a new project which would allow cryptocurrency investors to buy into Trump-branded real estate projects using digital tokens. Jared Kushner obviously has, sort of been involved in the Middle East peace process. He runs a private equity firm that's taken from a fund that is led by the Crown Prince. So Trump received these questions and he batted them off by saying, I'm not involved in my family's affairs. I'm not involved in that. I'm devoting 100% of my time to being president of the US. Rodney, is there a conflict of interest here?
It's very noble of him. There's so many conflicts of interest when it comes to Donald Trump. I don't think isolating one really. I mean, we could prove more than one, I'm sure. I just think that it goes with the territory for him. It's old school grafting, and he's showing how easy it is to get away with it within the American system. And yeah, it's I mean, I think we would need a series of episodes if we want to go into all the questionable deals. This is just one more, and nobody cares. Nobody cares because it's neither here nor there for their what they're experiencing in their day-to-day life. Um, so yeah, it's just like it's Donald Trump, right? That's what it's
Well, I
put
mean,
down to. Nobody
you
really
know,
cares either way. He's done it before. He'll do it again. Yeah, of course he's. And by the way, there is an American attitude that if the country's going well and he's got his hands in the till, who cares, right? But I even think when the country's not going well, it's he's not getting the country going well. There's still not this interest in whether or not he's getting a few dollars out of it himself.
I mean, when you spend 15, 20 years, as the right wing media ecosystem has done, convincing people that you know that there's a big deep state, everyone is corrupt, all politicians are corrupt, etc. You're going to have people desensitized to this sort of stuff, and this has been done on purpose. It's done intentionally to make everybody so sick of hearing this sort of stuff, so that you can get away with a whole bunch of, I won't even say conflicts of interest, just blatantly corrupt behavior. So he's managed to do that masterfully over the last 10, 15 years. And as Rodney said, people don't care. But there's also an element of, people in MAGA are in a cult. That cult is effectively, your loyalty to that cult comes with a whole bunch of responsibilities of not questioning what the cult leader does. And it's not just MAGA people, it's a whole bunch of people who you think would know better. And these are Republicans who either in the past were non-MAGA people or anti-Trump, etc. But a whole bunch of people have jumped on the bandwagon, and they've dug themselves so deep into the bowels of this cult that they can't get out. And so yeah, I mean they're not. You can't criticize the leader. And so what you end up having is people who care about these sorts of corruption scandals and conflicts of interest, etc., are the same people, whether it's certain people on the Democratic side or people in civil society, journalists, etc. But they can't cut through the noise because at the end of the day, people on the MAGA side, but also people outside of MAGA are so desensitized to this. It's the thing people say is, yeah, it's Trump. Of course, he's corrupt. It's a very sad state of affairs, to be honest with you.
But there's also moments that give him and that way of thinking a win, right? And I'm thinking here of what happened with the BBC, the UK broadcaster, last week. So the Panorama program airs a documentary around the January 6 riots that took place, and they edit a particular part of Trump's speech in two different sections without using what is often used in TV, which would make it so clear that these were two different parts of the speech that were edited together. So the insinuation then from the Trump camp or Trump himself is that this made Trump look bad. This made Trump look like he incited violence on January 6th, and that there's an issue with that. There's an issue associated with that. And so then Trump threatens to sue the BBC. There's some serious sackings at the BBC or people that have stepped down at the BBC, and all this controversy over something that happened many, many years ago, and that is a story that's sort of long been told. Rodney, talk us through how we got to where we got to, why there were so senior members of the BBC staff who stood down or were sacked, however you want to look at it, and the implications for Trump moving forward on something like this.
So there's this historical thing which is less prevalent these days, and it's a modern way of thinking. But in the old days, there was this thing called accountability, and that's why people in the BBC have resigned, because they were accountable for the program that went out in their minds as the senior figures within the BBC. It was clearly a mistake, but it was also, as rightly pointed out by the BBC, when they offered Donald two fingers instead of 5 billion in compensation. They pointed out that one, it wasn't shown in the US. Two, the edit was part of a longer program, of which much was constituted interviews with MAGA supporters and so on, and therefore sufficient positive messages about Trump. 3, he actually won the election, and 4, where's the damage? And on that basis, I suspect this will go nowhere. But once again, I think Trump, having been able to bully and cajole US media companies into just paying him money through the threat of legal proceedings, has decided to go a bit further and do so with the BBC. If we'd been sitting here 10 years ago and you had said to me there's an American president going to try and sue the BBC, it would have been, basically insane. But we're now having that insanity as our reality. It has happened. It's going to really irritate the British public, I suspect, and it'll go nowhere. So it's just another headline, I think.
I mean, it's just laughable. You don't need a bad edited uh, documentary from the BBC to kind of, show that Trump did some awful things on January 6th. We we all saw it with our own eyes. He went to an event, spoke to people, and said, "I'll see you over there. Everyone should do the right thing." And then we ended up having effectively an insurrection, and an attempt at a coup where people were trying to hurt or trying to kill police officers, were trying to kill members of Congress, etc. So what the BBC did was silly. Obviously, I think they could have edited that better, but I don't think this changes anything. Him suing, as Rodney said, looks stupid. Again, I think if you're a Democrat, you're going to love this story because you're going to say, I just hope he continues to talk about suing the a foreign broadcaster. Like this is exactly where you want him to be talking about, because the more he talks about that, the less he's talking about what he's doing to fix the cost of living crisis, what he's doing to make people's lives better, etc. So it's a big distraction for him to be doing it, but it's again, it's Trump. He can't help himself. He's backed into a corner, and he thinks everything like this is a great distraction from the problem of the day, which is for him Epstein. But what it's actually doing is distracting him from what he needs to be doing in the next 12 months ahead of the midterms, and that is fixing the cost of living crisis.
And he's not doing that. And that bit hasn't gone too well.
Absolutely. We saw the results of that. I mean, the results of that election are incredible. And, to think that that many people would be going out of their way and dying to vote for a party which had an approval rating, and I'm talking about the Democrats here, of 30% or something, the worst approval rating in about 50 years. To think that people are so kind of excited and encouraged to vote for a party with such low approval rating tells you something, and that is that it's a very, very clear message to Trump and the Republicans. And I think hopefully at some point, this all many people come to the realization that Trump may be what he is, but it's the Republican Party and people who should know better that are enabling him.
Well, that's everything that's happening in the US. But let's head over to Asia now and a deepening dispute between its two largest economies. That's, of course, Japan and China over the Japanese Prime Minister's comments on Taiwan. Let's backtrack for a moment. Rodney, what were the comments and how has it led to this dispute between Japan and China?
Look, I think if we can say, how did this sort of begin? And the reality is, it sort of began with a new leader in Japan, and therefore, in order to be seen as a strong leader, which she's seeking to project in the region, she made comments in relation to Taiwan, which is obviously a very sensitive issue for China, and it's resulted in a pretty um, significant diplomatic spat, which has now turned into Japan warning its citizens in China to be vigilant, and in effect to be cautious. You're under some sort of uh, risk of harm from the broader Chinese public. Um, I mean, but basically, she decided, and I would say quite deliberately, to make these comments about any Chinese attack on Taiwan would be a threat to Japan, um, and there should be a military response, and that's in effect um, a deviation from what previously had been the Japanese position of not making these types of comments. But it's pretty unremarkable perspective, but it's that it's never really been something which has been verbalized. And yeah, it's clearly come with the change in leader, a leader seeking to assert herself. She considers herself the Iron Lady of Asia or East Asia. And yeah, yeah, it's turning into a proper diplomatic dispute. And obviously China in the aftermath advised citizens not to travel to Japan. Significant element of tourism GDP in Japan comes from China, something like 1 in 4, or a quarter of GDP, maybe more than 1 in 4 visitors. But yeah, I mean it's it's significant. Flights have been cancelled. Yeah, I mean this is just, these things are hard to manage down once they get going. But I don't feel like it was a misstep by the new Japanese leader. I think it was calculated a calculated public assessment of yeah, and to try and differentiate herself from what had gone before, that she's uh, more vocal, got clearer thinking on these things, and prepared to stand up and not be yeah, under the shadow of China in some way. I mean, it feels like it's directly resulted from a change in leader rather than a misstep. I don't know, Ozan, maybe you think it was an inexperienced leader making a comment that they otherwise shouldn't have made. I don't know.
I mean, look, I'm torn between those two explanations for it. I think there's every reason to think that maybe it was an amateur mistake, a misstep. However, I think the arguments that you outline are very solid, particularly when you look at the direction of many of these countries. You see it in Japan and other countries, not just in the region, but across the world, that leaders are, they have a populist streak, and I'm not talking about economic populace here, but it's the whole kind of, whether it's America first, Japan first. They know this sort of stuff resonates. They know that the real topics around economic kind of performance and the economic situation of the public, these are hard topics to fix, and you know they resort to other areas where they know they can get a bit of a bump in their popularity and help to shape the narrative around who they are. It would make sense politically for her to do something like this. Rodney, as you said, comes in Iron Lady. I'm going to be tough. It's Japan first. And look, a lot of it also is the US's position, which used to be the case that many countries, allies across the region, could rely on the US. But more and more, not just within the public in these countries, but I think governments are looking and saying, the US doesn't have any capacity to deal with anything outside of its own mess right now. We need to ensure our public that we're going to defend our country and our sovereignty and what have you, and all of these sorts of things. So I think there's arguments for both sides. Your arguments are probably stronger than just a simple mistake because I think she's been around long enough to know
That's
that,
what I think.
you know,
Exactly.
anything you say when it involves the topic of your relationship with China is going to be scrutinized in every which way. And yeah, they were pretty open, pretty bold statements. So I'm not surprised that this has happened. China has no choice. I think China has to respond with the way that they're responding. Uh, it's look, I think it's political posturing. I know today there's been some very top high level diplomatic talks to kind of ease the tensions and bring down the temperature. I think, things will go back to normal. Those two countries need each other in the region. They play a very significant role in balancing out a lot of different kind of geopolitical factors. Economically, they need each other, and politically, they, to a certain degree, also need each other as well. So I think there's no doubt that things will get back on track and their relationship will, I guess, get back to normal. But if you're in the tourism industry in Japan, you'd be pretty upset with what your new prime minister has done.
Not unless you get to withhold part of the booking fee on a cancellation fee and hope that by next week all the bookings can flood him back in. You get to sell it twice. Maybe it's
Well,
all right.
judging by my experience when it comes to booking things and canceling them, I hope they have a better experience
Better
than me in terms
experience.
of getting refunds.
Sounds like a whole episode in itself, gents. The number of times Ozan's booked something and
I'm
then
I'm still
cancelled
going to
it.
I'm still going to therapy on it, man.
Well, that's a good way to end this week's episode, gents. Wonderful chatting. See you next week.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. See ya.